Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and we're in our virtual studio. We're not back in our studio inside Renaissance Bank in Alpharetta quite yet, but we hope to be there at some point in the near future as conditions allow. But in the meantime, if you're looking for a more personal experience with your banking, whether that's business or personal, give Renaissance a call. They've done a great job for a lot of the small businesses I know of personally who have been after SBA-related PPP financing and other loans. So if you're looking for someone whose phone is actually on the hook, who they answer their own phone, who will give you a more personal experience, go to renaissancebank.com, find your local office. They've got over 200 across the South ready to serve you, and make an appointment and go see your local banker. They do awesome work, and I recommend them personally. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome Denson Pepper. Denson is a CPA here in the North Fulton area. Denson, welcome.
Thank you.
I guess you're much more than North Fulton and in terms of the clients you work with, actually. But why don't you give everybody a little overview of you and what you're up to and how you serve the market?
I'm a CPA from my office, actually located in Ackworth, although the internet allows me to connect with virtually anybody. I've been a CPA licensed originally in Florida, moved to Georgia in 1979, and I've been here since. In about the last 5 to 7 years, maybe a little bit longer, I specialize now in tax resolution work, which means that either you filed a return and you owe money to the IRS and or the state of Georgia and have been unable to pay it, or in a little bit more serious situation, you haven't filed your income tax return. So I'm the kind of person that has to make sure that the returns are done, or if they're done correctly. And then we have to make sure that it's assessed properly by the federal and state governments. And then we see about generally establishing a repayment plan, but there are a different variety of different options, responses to the two taxing agencies. So that's basically what I do. I have a website, DensonPepperCPA.com. I do not advertise on TV, but there's more than enough work in the metro Atlanta area without not having to worry about that.
You know, it is fascinating to me, and I'm sure other folks that actually file their returns every year, that there are folks that do not file a tax return. Say more about that.
Well, the numbers have gotten at least what they statistically when they do an analysis, and I think the last one I saw was 2 or 3 years ago. The numbers of returns that should be filed and owe income tax probably in our country is maybe 5 to 7 million that are not filing their returns. And the numbers I saw, and I don't know how they're figuring this out, but I guess they're guesstimating. The federal government is losing maybe $35 to $40 billion a year just on that alone.
Wow.
Yep.
Just on non-filers.
Just on non-filers. Yep. The IRS has now headed, recently appointed a tax attorney out of California who did this kind of work, tax resolution work, if I understand his biography. And he has made more than one comment that he's going to be much more aggressive than past commissioners have been about going after folks that are not filing. And for those people that did file and owe money and have not arranged some kind of repayment plan or some kind of valid response, he's going to be much more aggressive with them. I don't know how large those numbers are, but my guess is they get, I think I read it's probably in the range of, I'm probably underestimating it, $200 to $300 billion a year that they're not collecting as a result of all of this. The IRS budget has been cut by Congress 5 or 6 years straight, and last year Congress did allocate more money, bring in more collection agents, so-called revenue agents and officers. So I think that was passed, and I think they are hiring them. Once we get past next Wednesday, the new due date this year, July the 15th, then we're going to start seeing more collection notices. They're probably going to start using the software that they had for several years and for some reason quit using it to start going after non-filers. They have the capability to find people that are not filing. What folks don't realize is everybody, when somebody pays you a W-2 or sends you do work for them and you're not an employee and you receive, for instance, a 1099 miscellaneous, all of that is posted to your Social Security number. And the IRS knows about it. I mean, it's on the record. They want to go back and start taking a look at it. Mm-hmm. So I think what's going to happen, I'm sure what's going to happen is a lot of these people are going to start getting notices inquiring about, please file your income tax return. If you don't do it, then what they typically will do is they'll just take the numbers that have been reported to them, and their computers will complete the tax return for you with not the benefit of normal deductions or exemptions or credits or anything to reduce it. And they will send you a bill for that. And it's called substitute return. Mm-hmm. And unless you, the idea is to encourage you to file it to supersede that. But if you don't do that, almost always, not always, but generally, those numbers are going to be showing much higher than it would have been if you'd actually prepared the return and submitted it.
Now, when we were speaking right before we came on, you mentioned that there are quite a number of, proportionally speaking, folks that are millionaires. I mean, people of means that have not filed their returns. And I mean, that this is not just what some people may think, folks that are maybe not making a whole lot of money and, don't want to file, don't want to pay taxes. It's folks that have a lot of means. Yep.
The articles have come out recently here in the last couple of weeks. Of course, it always does come out, during tax time. But I read several articles that millionaires, more than a few, I'm not sure about billionaires, but millionaires, at least multimillionaires, have not been filing returns. And there's going to be a concerted effort. They'll be searching the databases and they'll be looking at the transcripts that I just described. And almost certainly they're going to be assigned individual agents or officers to pursue them personally. Normally, when you file your return and the tax is assessed, then the automatic collection service ends, and you're not dealing with one person in particular. It's a series of notices that get a little bit harsher every 30 days, and then after the third or fourth one, typically you'll get, if we don't hear from you, we're going to levy your bank account or any kind of assets that we find. In this particular case, the monies that potentially are owed are probably so great that they're going to be assigning some of these newly hired officers to actually go after these folks on a one-on-one basis. That's probably what's going to happen.
And it's striking in these days of, I guess, electronic, digital footprints, if you will, smartphones, what have you, that folks think that they can get away with not filing. That's striking to me. I'm just curious how it is folks think that they can evade filing on a long-term basis.
Well, when people come to me, and I have them that haven't filed 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever the case might be, sometimes more than that, I always ask them, well, did you receive a notice from federal government or longtime Georgia resident, Georgia, about where the return is? And at least half the time, people will say, well, no, I never received a notice. I thought they had forgotten about me. I didn't receive a threatening levy notice. No one called me. So I kind of figured they had forgotten about me. Well, no, they didn't forget about you. The problem is that if you wait long enough, they're going to forget about you. The other side of that coin is the statute of limitations generally for them to collect, the federal government, is 10 years. I mean, there are things that add to that, but generally for most folks, it's 10 years. That statute does not begin running until the return is filed. So if you won't owe money for prior years and you think you're going to wait it out because you read about 10-year statute of limitations, it doesn't work that way. Now, I will say that practically speaking, in almost all cases, they will only go back 6 years prior to the current year and expect returns to be filed. So I tell people that are scared to death if they hadn't filed in 10 or 15 years. The general rule is absent fraud or some kind of suspected criminality, they will only go back 6 years. And then they will expect you to file on a current basis every year after that. So that would be where we are right now. Mm-hmm. That would be 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, and the court's filing 2019.
Denson, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the people ignore notices, right? I mean, I guess they get these IRS notices and they just kind of hope it'll go away. I mean, maybe that's part of the problem, and this builds up over time. Is that the problem that most people have? Yeah.
A lot of them that I deal with, they will I'll say, will you please, our first meeting, bring in your notices, and literally they will bring in about a 3-inch high stack of envelopes with the certified green on the outside, and it's never been opened.
Right.
They get scared. I do this all the time. They get scared, and then they just get kind of catatonic about the whole thing, and they're petrified. They know they've got to do something, but they can't take that first step. And if no one is pressing them about it, then they just put it aside. Put it back in the desk drawer, on the bottom shelf.
Folks, we're chatting here with Denson Pepper. He's a CPA and I think maybe a psychologist on the side. Given what you did, the folks you deal with, that probably comes into play, I guess, Denson. But talk about how when someone comes in, they're ready to make good. The IRS is, I guess, hot enough on their trail that they feel like they need help. How does it work? How does someone work with you?
Well, typically what I do is we talk about it, and the first thing I always do, and I'm assuming everybody in tax resolution does this too, you get a signed power of attorney for, if it's husband and wife, you get one separately for them, but you get one for everybody. And then I submit that to the federal government, and then although it's slowed down with the shutdown here recently, in maybe 10 to 15 business days, once the IRS has accepted it and it's in the system, then I can pull all the transcripts and I can go back at least 10 years and take a look at their history. And a lot of people don't even know if they filed. A lot of people thought they filed and didn't file, but that's the starting point to see the extent of the problem. And it's like a roadmap for what the IRS has done, penalties and interest assessed. And then we have a discussion about either returns have to be caught up and filed while we're doing all that, or we need to take a look at what the years are by year, how much is owed, including the tax and penalties and interest. And then typically the client will fill out a questionnaire online, which basically they will go in and indicate their assets and liabilities and their monthly income and expenses. And then that's the basis for seeing what according to IRS regulations, what they would accept as some kind of repayment plan to begin. A lot of people get up, they're I don't know, they make too much out of this. It's not rocket science, but it sure can be made that way, and if you let it get complicated. When you fill out that stuff, then that brings up a variety of possible alternatives. There would be a full pay installment agreement where you agree to pay off everything you owe, and then we discuss how much it would be, and that would be related to what the questionnaire indicates, and then it would be over typically 60 to 72 months. Now, at the same time, if you are a homeowner, then if they haven't placed a lien, the federal government, then that's the time when you're probably going to get a notice if they placed a lien on your home, which gives notice to all other creditors. I see more cases where people are trying to refi or maybe refinance and take cash out, and there's the lien sitting there, and they can't do it because they're going to be paid first, and a lot of folks get confused about all of that. So that's when I see a lot of this stuff. And sometimes we can work around that or subordinate the lien, or we can have it paid off to get them out of that situation, or reduce below a certain level. And then the federal government will agree to allow you to repay it on some kind of repayment plan, but they have released it or subordinated that lien. That makes life a lot simpler when somebody starts checking your credit out. It doesn't look good, and it's certainly not to your benefit if somebody's looking to loan you money or you want to purchase. But that's typically the process. I will mention that since I see Optimum Tax, especially on TV, and some other firms from midnight to 3 a.m. when I'm unable to sleep sometimes. I see them too on there. The offer in compromise, it is a viable alternative, and yes, I have used it, and I've got one going right now. It's not quite as simple as they make it out to be. If you qualify for an offer in compromise with the federal government, it generally takes, just to give you an idea, if you start right now and you submit all the paperwork, then it's typically going to take 3 to 5 months just to get an agent assigned, just to begin the process of vetting what you submitted, and before you even get to the decision-making process. And while that's going on, this statute of limitations I talked about, the 10 years typically, that period where the offer is outstanding, and I think 60 days after that, whether you're successful or not, because if you're successful, you don't care. If you're not successful, then that time frame is going to be added to the 10 years. So I don't think they always tell you that going in, but for a lot of people, it's not going to make a difference anyway. But
yeah, I want to make sure
compromise, even though you have the numbers. Yeah, even if you otherwise the numbers, and just to give you an idea. And by the way, if you're interested in an offer in compromise, you can go online now. They've had it for several years. The IRS has their own calculator that you can go in and just answer the questions. And if you do it accurately, you'll have an idea about what the minimum amount is that they would accept. You don't have to go to anybody to do that. If you know anything about a computer, there's a calculator for what the minimum amount is they would accept. But in general, very general terms, what you're offering the IRS, there are different variations, but the offering compromise that most people deal in is doubt as to collectability. That means that I owe the money, but I just don't think in the foreseeable future I'm going to be able to pay it. So here is an amount. Will you accept it, IRS? And the basics of the calculator, if you go online and do it yourself, or you can talk to anybody, you're basically indicating your personal net worth. That would be your assets minus your liabilities, and then it would be your projected monthly income minus allowable deductions over a 12-month period. So you put those two together, and in broad terms, that would be your minimum offer. It's not a foolproof thing, and the IRS has discretion to say, well, you know, I'm looking at the numbers and I agree with you, and yeah, you want to pay me $25,000 and you owe $100,000, so you want us to write off $75,000, even though you otherwise qualify. They still can tell you that, yeah, that's fine, but we think there's 7 years left to collect on you, and we think that we can collect more than $25,000 without accepting this. Mm. They don't quite bring that up in those commercials, but the other thing is too, and I don't know the answer to the question because I haven't seen in my literature yet. And they're not really. They basically have shut down collections till July 16th, technically. The time when offers and compromise are generally you've got a better chance of succeeding is when it's the lowest point of your financial history. You've lost your job, you've been furloughed, your hours have been cut, you might have lost the job for sure, you're behind on your mortgage, and you're just barely making monthly payments. And that formula that I described for offer and compromise, your net worth plus 1 year of potential earnings minus allowable deductions, it might be a real low number. And I don't know with the pandemic and all those folks that are not coming back, their jobs are not coming back. Federal unemployment, $600 is at this point expiring the end of this month. I don't know how they're going to respond to people and start sending it in, because technically they might be eligible for it. I'm not saying they won't grant it, but they might give you a letter saying, well, I tell you what, we're going to wait a year or 18 months, and this is how much we expect you to send in, and then we'll revisit this in 2021 if you haven't gotten a new job or you still can't make the payments. And I'm not trying to dissuade anybody. I just don't know the answer to the question.
Right. Denson, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, why someone hires you versus to try to do this themselves, or works with, the garden variety, kind of all things CPA that they might work with. As I understand it, I mean, this is a pretty specialized piece of tax work that you're involved in.
It is. I think what I attempt to do with people, number one, although this is less so than it was before the shutdown, I always met with somebody at least once in my office, face to face, so they know who I am, and we talk about it, and we get an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. A larger firm, I truthfully don't know. I mean, if you're calling somebody in a different city, I'm not sure if that's how Optimal works, so they have a local line. But my guess would be if they're advertising that much, no matter, good gosh, what the TV advertising costs must be to those guys, they're going to have to mark it up at least enough for that. plus the attorneys and or CPAs that are actually doing the work that I do, plus a profit margin, I wouldn't profess to know what they're charging. Sometimes I hear about it. The only thing I can say is for the people I deal with, I take it personally, and I make sure, number one, that we catch up appropriately. I review their tax returns that the assessments were based upon to make sure there's not a problem there. It wasn't done incorrectly. And then the part that I always emphasize is no matter what the IRS agrees to, that you might say, well, that's a good deal. From the day that you do it, from the next year forward, you've got to be compliant, which means you've got to file your tax return and you've got to pay what's owed by the extended due date for the following year. You can't keep rolling this over and incurring additional taxes owed every year and then just expect them to redo a new installment agreement. I see a lot of that. The IRS generally, I mean, they'll do it, but every time you do it, it's going to be costly to you. So I make sure at least for 1 year that people are filing properly. It's being done correctly. So we don't get involved with that. Because if you're not compliant, which means filing and paying on a current basis after you agree, whatever the year is through that they agreed to accept your proposal, then they can just go in and negate all of that and everything's currently collectible and you start all over again with them. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying they're coming after you, but it's going to be more expense just to redo everything and then deal with another agent or officer or whoever picks up the phone. So I try not to get clients in that kind of situation. Truthfully, I can't see how the ones that you're calling in, I'm sure they're competent. I'm not saying that. I'm just not sure if they have the time to follow up on a lot of things that I have to follow up on locally in order to do it.
Yeah, well, correct me if I'm wrong. This is my assumption. I would think that the IRS would see me as a Joe taxpayer. I'm trying to make things right. If I've engaged Denson Pepper, who's experienced and got a lot of record of contact with the IRS, and you have to have credibility with them to deal with the IRS successfully over a long period of time, like you do. I would think that bodes better for me in trying to resolve my problem than if I'm just trying to do it myself and or do it with somebody that really doesn't have the experience you do.
Well, I agree with that. There are a lot of competent people out there, and it's like a lot of things. You can figure out how to do brain surgery by Googling it, I guess. I don't know.
I suppose so. Yeah,
it's such a good thing to do, but a lot of this stuff. I mean, to be kind of blunt about it, a lot of this stuff is you can call them up. You can go to the IRS.gov site. You can find the paperwork and what you have to submit. I'm not saying that. It's just that to coordinate all of that, and the problem is that you will submit something, and then you won't get a response. You'll have to follow up 10 days later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, in order to prod them, in order to get somebody on the stick to respond to you. And it's not that they're not trying. It's just that the paperwork. The other day, the powers of attorney were sitting in large trucks outside, I think, the CAF unit in Ogden, and they were guesstimating 5, 6, 7 million individual powers of attorney that had not been submitted yet because of that. It's the sheer amount of paperwork and the time involved and being persistent about it. I'm not saying that you can't do it. I would never say that, but I think people underestimate the time involved, and then you start talking about the people I deal with. What's the value of your hour, and is it going to be worth your while to pursue all this? The other part is that after a couple of years of doing this, I think one thing that I've found is if you're upset or you're nervous, like we all would be, if you owe money or you hadn't filed or whatever, if you start talking to whoever picks up the phone, for instance, to the IRS, you can say the wrong thing. And I've had clients or before they came to see me, potential clients that screamed at the IRS, that cursed them, profanities on the phone. I mean, it got to the point really where we got almost close to the threat threshold. And I think the IRS probably were investigating them, the criminal side. When I deal with them, I don't have to do that. I don't have to I have to be involved, be persistent, but I try not to bring the emotions in. I try to look at everything dispassionately and what's best for the client before we proceed. And not every case, there are people that have done it, and I'm sure they're going to be doing it. But oftentimes the IRS prefers to deal with somebody that does this day in and day out, so they don't waste their time submitting stuff that's going to have to be resubmitted or making offers that are just unreasonable, or more importantly, with what we're going into right now after next Wednesday, that are appealing everything for 3 to 6 months and wasting everybody's time when probably they're not going to get their way anyway. I think. Well, you need to be reasonable about this. If you owe the money and they think you can repay it, then probably you're going to be paying something back.
Folks, we've been chatting here with Denson Pepper. He's a CPA whose expertise is tax resolution and working with the IRS on non-filers and delinquent tax bills, what have you. Denson, final question for you as we wrap up here. One thing that strikes me about you, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I went to your website. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and it makes sense, is that people seem to value you because of your bedside manner. I mean, if I can put it that way. I mean, they come to you in a pretty vulnerable time. They're trying to make right. They're embarrassed. They're upset. They fear the worst. You seem, based on what I've seen, to put folks at ease.
Well, I try to. I don't want to put them to sleep.
Right.
Either, but I see it on TV, and I've been to enough seminars for very bright people, CPAs, attorneys, financial planners, whatever, that do this kind of work. And I've seen it where they're aggressive to the point of being obnoxious. And I guess in some cases, if it's something really flagrant, then yes, you can do that. But the people you're dealing with, the IRS, their personnel that are involved with this, I always try to be polite but persistent. And then if necessary, we talk to a manager if I think the agent I'm dealing with is incorrect in what they're saying. But I never, ever get to the point of yelling or screaming or jumping up and down or threatening or the rest of it. It doesn't help matters any. It just, you're dealing with human beings, and every time you talk to somebody at the IRS, they are entering information on the electronic file about their conversation with you. And it's just not a good idea to get involved with that. I don't think it's necessary. I've seen some folks do it, and I guess they get real splashy results. But I kind of wonder if you win 2 cases and antagonize everybody else and your name gets out that way to the IRS, then I'm not sure if you're helping overall helping folks at all with that.
Folks, we've been here with Denson Pepper CPA. Denson, this has been great. I know there's some folks out there, certainly based on what you've said, that need your help, need to take advantage of your services. Maybe you can give them contact information, how they can be in touch.
Yeah, my website is, if you Google or whatever, Denson Pepper CPA.com, it will pull it up. And then there's a spot on there where you can actually leave me a message, and that will be emailed to me to my box. And then it asks for a little bit of information and a phone number and an email address. And then I can communicate with them that way. I find that that's a little bit less threatening, but I do get the messages, and I always try to return phone calls. I don't like it when people don't return my phone calls, and I've made it a point of my practice always to try to respond to phone calls in a timely fashion or any kind of communication.
Good words here from Denson Pepper CPA. Denson, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Folks, just a quick reminder that if you need some help with administrative tasks, bookkeeping, maybe some marketing for your business, and you need that outsourced to someone who can take those problems off your hands, I've got an answer for you that involves picking up the phone and calling Office Angels. Chief Executive Angel there, S.E. Escobedo, is awesome. I know because I have done work with her on various aspects of my business, and she has a team of angels that are terrific. They fly in, get the job done, and fly back out, and they're used to working virtually. They've been doing this for 18 years, so they know how to work with you in a virtual environment. So give SE a call, 770-442-9246. Explain your problem, and she'll be glad to help you, and tell her we sent you. And just another quick reminder that if you want to find any of our shows, you can go to your favorite podcast app, and that's any of them, folks. Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Search for North Fulton Business Radio, and you can find us there. We would love it if you give us a great review, because that helps folks find the show, folks that can benefit from hearing from the good work of business leaders like Denson and others that we've had on the show over the last 4 years. Now over 250 shows. And we would love it if you would connect with us on social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. We're at North Fulton BRX. So for my guest, Denson Pepper, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.